If you're a residential real estate agent earning $200,000 a year and you want to grow your passive income, this show's for you. Learn the secrets other agents use and hear from experts in our field in order to guide you along your journey to investing in assets like apartment communities so that you can turn your commissions into cash flow. I'm Randall McLeod. Let's go, baby. Hey, welcome back. All right. Today I am talking with an investor. His name's Nathan Orange. He's out of the Michigan market. Awesome conversation. I personally geeked out on just learning about rental arbitrage that he is a strategy that he is implementing in his market with great effect. So many gold nuggets in this conversation. I'm sitting there asking him something. He's like, well, maybe I shouldn't share this. And then he does, and it's perfect. It's awesome. So Nathan, thanks for dropping all the gold nuggets there, man. So we go in and we talk about, how he's identifying properties, where he's looking. We talk about how to get tenants and how he markets, and just in general investing and how he's doing his investing. He's been in real estate for a long time. He went through the great financial crisis, 2008, talks about how that informed his investing decisions going forward, why he invests the way he invests now. So you're going to get a ton out of it because the strategies that he's using as an agent, you can implement these things and you can learn, or you can partner with investors that are doing things like he's doing, learn from your investors, and then go out and execute yourself. So I really love this conversation. I hope you do too. If you're getting value out of the show, please go on, rate and review. Always got to say that because it helps us out a ton. Quick word from our sponsors, and then we're going to jump into the show with Nathan Orange. Here we go. We're proud to be sponsored by Ridgeline Investment Group. Ridgeline has a track record of transacting more than $53 million in assets throughout Texas. Ridgeline is currently looking to acquire 100 to 200 unit Class B multifamily communities between 5 and 20 million in San Antonio, Temple, Waco, Tyler, and other Texas secondary markets. To learn more about Ridgeline Investment Group, visit www.ridgelineig.com. All right, Nathan, welcome to the show. It's good to have you on. Thanks for joining me. Why don't you just get started for those who don't know you? Tell us, where you are operating and what type of investments you are working on.
Okay. Yeah. Again, I'm Nathan Orange. I'm based primarily out of Michigan. That's where I'd say probably 85-90% of my investments are. It consists of multifamily, a lot of short-term corporate rentals, both owning and arbitrage, more so arbitrage right now. And there's a reason for that I think is important to talk about. And then also I have some properties that I bought on land contract, sold on land contract. I also have a couple rent to own, which I kind of pushed away from that. And then I've done flips as well, like probably many investors have, but I've kind of pushed away from that as well for very specific reasons. Okay. But I do have a property in Nevada, Las Vegas, and also in Davenport, Florida. But again, the majority is in Michigan.
Okay. So yeah, we'll talk about all of that. That's good stuff. So you and I were talking just a second ago though, and you seem like you have a background and a bit of history in the real estate market that may have, influenced how you invest or what you are doing currently. So why don't you kind of backtrack a little bit? What was your first, foray into real estate, and were you investing at the time you were doing this, or are you just working in the industry?
Yeah, it was a combination of both. It was much more as a lender, as a commercial real estate lender. I was one for 25 years before I left that to do investing full time. But I lived through that fun experience we were talking about during 2008. So I got to see probably one of the worst markets ever. But what's funny about that is, as bad as the market is, I feel like I learned probably more during that period than any other time. Even though I didn't have a lot of investments at that time, I think I only had like maybe 1 or 2 rentals and very basic like Carlton Sheets type rentals. Like, I'll be honest, I wouldn't even consider myself an expert. Didn't even know for sure exactly what I was doing, but it was something I wanted to try and get into. The one value of the business is just the contacts I made, business owners who invested in, some invested in real estate, others just had businesses. But, I picked up a lot of stuff from them in terms of just how they looked at things, like running a business, because to me, real estate is absolutely a business. It's not just owning a property. Everybody says, hey, it's passive income, but there's certain things that are passive income, but when you have rentals and real estate, to me, it's not truly passive income. I mean, yes, you can get to the point that maybe you dish everything off and someone else is handling, 98% of it. But for the most part, I mean, I think we're kind of all out there hustling, we're working, and it's definitely not passive, but it is good recurring monthly income. So, I learned a lot during that. I saw some crazy things. Some companies, like we were talking about developers and construction companies. I worked with a couple that had been around, like 100 plus years, families, generations, that within like a 6 to 9 month period were completely out, had $3-4 million saved in liquidity from just years and years and years of successful construction development that were completely wiped out. So, I mean, I think for me, it was kind of a rude awakening in a good way, because I would say during the late 90s, early 2000s, there was almost this euphoria where it just felt like, man, this is never going to end. Like every time I drove somewhere, it's like, oh, look, there's farmland that was sold. 2 months later, all of a sudden they're putting in the roads and curbs, and it was just like nonstop, just never ending, never ending. So, I mean, during that time period, I think it was definitely, it woke me up in, I would say, in a good way, in terms of just really realizing, A, how quick things can change. B, those periods are the time that you can really, I feel like, almost make 10 years of progress as far as financially, wealth, buying at the right time and accumulating, which I was not able to at that time. Unfortunately, like I said, I had a couple of rentals, but man, I know now, like if that same type of thing happens again, I mean, it's going to be full on accumulating as many properties as I possibly can.
Yeah. Are you talking about like in 2008? That's when you start acquiring, or you're saying through that run up, like knowing that is the time? Which one are you?
No, I'm saying more the 2008 when the bottom fell out. I mean, the prices that I saw, properties, both vacant land and, homes going for, 40, 50, 60% reductions. It was just, and I knew some of my business owners, and this is again where I kind of learned and saw things. I'm just like, wow, like they were going in heavy. I mean, just buying as much as they could get their hands on. And some of them had been through, some times, not maybe quite on par with 2008, but similar times where things kind of went wrong or bad. And they saw it as an opportunity and they kind of went full on. And, now again, to be fair, some of these properties and things where people bought, some of them, it took 10, 12 years for them to really come to fruition. But when you look at the returns, once they were able to kind of capitalize on what they purchased at that time, I mean, they were just incredible.
Yeah. I mean, you liken it to just buying and holding for the long term. It's like like Buffett, just buy and hold, weather the storm. He says something like you only need 3 or 4 good opportunities in your lifetime. That's when you make.
Oh, I agree.
Money. And I agree. I agree with that. So I was just talking to this real estate broker out of Alabama, and he mentioned something very similar to what you were doing, or it keyed me into something that we should all be doing if we're not. And that is, if you are currently in a position, like you're a commercial real estate broker, or you are a loan broker, or you are a broker just in real estate doing business, you can learn the business for free by being in one of those roles. And you de-risk your type of investment strategy if you start learning about it through other people's deal flow. So anyway, just wanted to highlight that again, because we literally just had another conversation with someone else.
Honestly, that's a great way to put it, because I feel like I got some of the most valuable education just financing on, even though I wasn't operating, financing to, all kinds of multifamily, mini storage. Those were 2 main, spaces within real estate that I did the majority of my financing in. So you really got to see, I got to see some very successful operators and just watch the way they navigated during times like this. So for me, it was extremely educational and beneficial. And even though during that time, obviously we weren't getting bonuses, because everyone became a kind of a workout loan officer, honestly, whether that was your original role or not. That's what you became because of what happened. So for me, I mean, it was just a huge learning experience, and it definitely changed how I looked at investing even, and kind of woke me up to like, okay, this old tired way of just doing like a standard, rental. I just, I started looking at different options, and I'm like, wow, there's a lot better ways than just that, at least for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to talk about that. One more question though about the GFC. So when do you see any parallels to, that financial crisis to today? Like anything that you said a minute ago, PTSD, right? From that event. Like,
Right.
do you see anything now, or do you feel like it's influencing any way you invest currently because you may see something on the horizon?
Yeah, it's definitely affecting how I invest right now, but I would say it has less to do with, it's a little bit different though, because it has more to do with what's happening with the interest rates. With the recent spike and continued increase that we're having in interest rates, where say before, especially in 2022, when rates were extremely low, I mean, I was buying. I was not doing any arbitrage. It was almost strictly buying because of where the rates were at. Where the rates are now, unless I'm getting the property with some kind of seller financing or something like that, that makes sense, because the investment debt right now is, I'm sorry, but it's just god awful. It's terrible. I mean, yes, and when you look way back in history, I know those people are going to, yell at me and send me dirty messages, evil messages, and say, well, rates used to be, 15%. But I'm just saying, historically, what things were priced at, they were priced at somewhat relative to those extremely low rates.
Yep.
So now that rates have come back up, deals that made sense before made sense in 2022. A lot of them that I'm looking at now with the current rates, again, unless it's seller finance or sub two or some other creative way, they just absolutely don't make sense. So because of that, I've shifted a lot more into arbitrage, especially for like my corporate and short-term rentals, because my returns are significantly higher. And I'd say on average, the monthly savings is anywhere between $300 to $400 a month, which doesn't seem like a lot, but over several properties, it adds up. And the other thing too, I think that's kind of key about arbitrage. And I don't want to get too far off the subject here, but I'm always big on looking at, cash on cash return, A, and then B, how quickly am I getting my return, my money back? If I buy a house, and the typical house I'd say I buy for corporate rental or short-term rentals, I would say somewhere around 300,000 is kind of like an average price. So if I'm putting down 20%, although it's probably more like 25% now, that's 60,000 down payment plus another 15,000 to kind of convert it, make it turnkey for a short-term or corporate rental. So I've got 75,000 into it, and say it's going to net average $1,500 per month. Well, I can arbitrage almost that exact identical property, and I maybe have 17 or 18,000 into it because I have the furniture, all that stuff, and then security deposit, first month's rent. But I'm still making $1,500 per month. And when you run the numbers, and I'm not like a math whiz, but 17,000, if you're averaging $1,500 per month versus 75,000, it's a 100%. Huge return. I can't get that return anywhere, right now, anywhere else.
It's about, what is that, 100%? I don't know. I mean,
yeah, in most cases, it's anywhere between 80 to over 100%, depending on the specific location and what the rents end up averaging.
Yeah. Okay. I want to dig into that because arbitrage. So I have a little mastermind we run here in San Antonio. One of the guys was talking to me about him doing rental arbitrage. There are a number of other people that I've talked to. Literally, one of the episodes just aired. I want to say it was 77 with the traveling realtor. Go back and listen to that. She is doing it all over the country and the world. She's like starting to buy up or arbitrage in different countries as well.
Yeah.
Very cool strategy. So I want to know nuts and bolts of that business. And obviously this is going to provide a ton of value for anybody looking to do or exercise this strategy. So it sounds like you've done a number of different types of investment. You mentioned sub two, and a few other things. So let's focus on this one first.
Okay.
Just because I'm curious how, again, you go about the process of identifying a property.
Okay.
Negotiating that with a
arbitrage.
What's
Correct?
that?
You're saying specifically for the arbitrage?
For sure.
Okay.
Yeah. So like, how do you identify, how do you negotiate that with either the landlord, the broker, or whatever? And then we can dig into it from there.
Okay. Yeah, no, and honestly, I think that's a great question. The first thing I do before I even talk to anybody, so I'll go on, I have two different approaches. I have some that are landlords, and those are typically single family homes, or sometimes they're townhomes, but majority of them are single family homes. The other approaches I have is with property management companies at apartment buildings. Each of them are kind of like a little bit different approach. Now, the thing that's the same for whether it's a landlord or an apartment building, a property management company, is I really dig into the area. I look at the air DNA, and then even more important than that, like mine is a little bit different. Like mine aren't really set up per se for, other than one that I have near Disney, which is only one. Everything else I have is really set up in terms of it's located near typically hospitals, universities, and like engineering, high tech companies, things like that. A good type of commercial, I guess, commercial population, so to speak, of businesses around there that have a need for whether it's short-term projects, whatever, that they have a need for short-term housing. So that's one thing I stay away more so, other than Florida, from the vacation, just because I feel like that's a little bit more up and down, and that can maybe change, a little bit more volatile, I'd say, than like my corporate rentals, because there's always people that are in medical that need to do stints or, things at the hospital, or maybe they're even there for, sometimes they're 3 months, sometimes it's even only a week. And then same with corporate rentals. You have people that are bringing employees in for special projects. Maybe it's 3 months, 30 days. Sometimes it might even be a 3-day where they're interviewing them. So like I try not just pigeonhole myself into just one thing, like say vacation. I prefer not that I may not do another vacation one, but what I like is I feel like I have a very steady base of occupancy, because I'm catering more towards having those hospitals, the universities, the engineering companies, and not that there's not other attractions as well. But for me, typically I kind of want all those things, not just one. I want all of them kind of in that market.
You need,
and so then
all the outs, essentially, multi-tenant base.
Yeah. So again, exactly to your point, I'm not just relying on somebody that's on vacation. I'm not just relying on someone that works at the hospital, and I'm not just relying on somebody that maybe is staff at the university, or they're coming to see their kids and they want to stay somewhere for a week. Like as many options as I can have as far as pool of potential guest occupants. That's really what I'm shooting for. Now, again, it is important. I do run the air DNA and I run the numbers, and then obviously the next thing after that is, okay, what's the rent? And then what are the expenses? Sometimes I find some great deals, even from landlords where, and it's already in there. Like they're advertising saying, hey, we cover all utilities, or we cover water and sewer and Wi-Fi. You only have to pay for, electric, gas, and the rent payment. I mean, which is great for me. So, I do a lot of upfront analysis on the area. And then, depending on if it's a landlord or an apartment building, a property management company, it's just a little bit different how I approach it. Now, the one thing I do up front just to try and save time, if it's an apartment building, is I find out, if they even allow corporate leases, because I lease it from my company, typically anywhere between 12 and 24 months. If it's a new area that I'm trying to get a feel for, normally I'll do 12 months and I want to see how it goes. And if that goes really well, what's nice is I kind of build a relationship with the property management company. And like, give you an example, I have one in Auburn Hills, Michigan, which won't mean anything to anybody, but I started with one. They came back to me after 3 or 4 months, and I was having like great performance right off the start. I was actually kind of surprised how well it did. They came to me and said, hey, we have a new renovated unit come up. Are you interested? Yeah, absolutely. So I picked that one up. Then I think it was like 3 months later, they called me again, and they love me because, everything's ACH. They get their payment. They're not dealing with your typical tenant. It's professionally clean 3 or 4 times a month on average. I'm your easiest tenant you're going to have, whether it's a landlord or a property management company. So there's a lot of advantages from their standpoint. And again, building up those relationships, it's nice because you kind of get fed additional opportunities. If that area is working out. Now, if it's an area I already know that works great and all that, I usually try and shoot for like a 24-month lease if possible. It just depends. I usually don't go much longer than that, only because, there's a lot of changes with regulation. And that's just going to be continuous. I don't think that's going to stop. So I don't want to get too locked in with too many units in one area for some reason. Also, they change everything and maybe it's not as profitable.
Yeah. All right. So I want to ask a couple things about just the strategy in general. When buying, if you're not buying anymore, regardless, you have a buy box. You're looking at X, Y, and Z. It needs to be a 3-2, 1,500 square feet. I want a pool, all these other things. Like, what is your buy box? regardless of purchase or if you're going to arbitrage, like same terminology by box.
Yeah, it's a little bit different, not based on apartments or houses, whether I arbitrage or buy. It's a little bit different based on what I'm targeting for. And what I mean by that is, if there's an area that's much more medical, honestly, I'm going to probably defer more to a 1-bedroom or maybe a 2-bedroom at most, because the majority of traveling nurses in our area, at least, a lot of times it's 2 people, it's 1 person. It's not groups of like 6, 7 people. So there's no need for me, if it's heavily medical, I want to kind of cater to what demand is for, like what space, how much square feet, how many bedrooms. So it may be 800 square feet, 1 bedroom, 1 bath, if I'm targeting travel nurses. Now, if it's more an Airbnb or corporate lease, a lot of those are going to be, 95% are going to be 2-bedroom, and in some cases 3-bedroom. It just really depends on the area and what I'm trying to target. And then also in the same area, like I may have a 3-bedroom, a 2-bedroom, and then a 1-bedroom, just to kind of like have a mix of different things. Because what I do like about this business is the more and more I do this, the more I either have companies reaching out and say, hey, Nathan, do you have anything in this market? Or, hey, Nathan, do you have, we only need a 2-bedroom. Do you have anything that's just a 2-bedroom? So it's, I'm trying to just keep building these relationships where they're coming to me versus me out kind of chasing deals in a sense. And then too, that helps me kind of determine or gauge, what is the need for. If I have 20 different people in 2 weeks that say, wow, we're really looking for a 1-bedroom that's 45 minutes from Detroit. I mean, that's great information for me to have, because
Sure.
it's you're filling a need. What is the need and how can I fill it? And then just, this is a little bit different, but when you're saying, or as explaining that there's a difference between the apartment management companies and the landlords. With the landlords, my approach is a little bit different, because the nice thing is with landlords, I can relate to them automatically because I have rentals, I've had rentals, I've done all that. So I've been on their end. I can totally relate with what they've gone through with tenants. A lot of times I'll share stories I've had with tenants, which are, not the best situations always, and they've had the same thing happen. But the one trick that's really worked for me as far as, 2 things. One, I'm still old school. I meet in person with the landlord. And when I do that, I'd say 99 out of 10, 90%, want to move forward versus if it's just a phone call. So I always make sure I meet in person if it's a landlord. The other thing, and this has been just a killer one for me, I almost hate to give it away, but it's worked very well, is what the best way to explain when they say like, well, why should I go with you? Or what's the advantage of going with you? And I love this explanation, and I didn't come up with it, but it's great, is I explain it and say, look, essentially what you're doing is you're getting a property manager to manage your property, take care of it. This rental now is becoming a truly passive investment for you for the first time, because you thought it was a passive investment, but then you're probably dealing with tenants not paying and everything else. I'm going to handle all that for you. So you're getting a property manager, but you're not paying the 10% fee. Like what better case is there for you as a landlord? And I mean, just talking through that, it's like sometimes their eyes like kind of light up and they're like, oh, this is perfect.
Yeah. It's not just that. I mean, you're almost guaranteeing their rent in a sense.
Exactly.
You're like, you're getting a property manager that's paying you rather than,
right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, exactly. And you bring up a good point, because the one thing I always talk about too is I say, look, the other advantage with me is it's going to be ACH every month, but I tell them too, like, look, even if say this unit is slow or I'm not getting the guests that I hope for, I have all kinds of other properties in different, avenues of revenue. So it's not a one-off type thing where this is all I have. And if I don't fill this up, you're not going to get paid. And the other thing that's made a big difference too, just before I forget, is I have on some of them, I have walkthrough videos done. And even though they're expensive, I feel like they kind of paid themselves back 100 times over. Is, whether it's a landlord and even with the property management companies, it's made a difference. I'll send them the walkthrough videos of some of my units, and they see, the quality, how well they are. And these are, high-end videos. And that just really helps seal the deal too. When they see that, they just feel way more comfortable. They're like, wow, you really set these up nice. You take care of them. And it's, it's about building credibility. And I feel like those 2 things have just been the way for me to lock into deals like almost effortlessly.
Got it. Okay. The way you described it initially, I thought that after you had it leased, you would send them a video of their property saying, hey, look, this is what I did. You're saying ahead of time, you're adding
Correct.
credibility by saying, hey, look, this is another unit that I manage. This is what I do. Boom.
Right.
Yeah, that's smart. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I send it right up front before even, it's finalized. But it's so funny to me, like when I've sent that out, how many deals after I send that, I mean, within an hour, a lot of times I'll just get a message and they're like, hey, we want to move forward. We think, it sounds good. It's like the little bit of icing on the cake to kind of seal the deal.
Yeah, that's gold. All right. Well, that's a solid value add right there for sure. I'm curious still on this deal. I got a couple questions I was jotting down. Best deal, worst deal. I mean, those are pretty given. Big mistakes to avoid. We'll kind of maybe touch on that. But okay, so you mentioned something about you get a great line of sight. This is something that I talk about in multifamily and just buying. If you own property in a certain area, you get the inside loop. Like you're like, okay, well, I know people want this, or like, how many leads did I get for this rental? Blah, 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 blah. Right. So then you hear that. So do you know of any strategies or tips that you could provide anyone who doesn't currently own something? What can they do to try to get some of that inside information? Do you have any ideas there?
Well, one is if they're talking specifically like short-term rental, I feel like overall the community of short-term rentals, I think it's been a pleasant surprise. I feel like even though we're somewhat competing, I feel like everybody still tries to help each other out. And like I have other operators that we talk and we're like, hey, if someone contacts me and my unit's filled and they have a unit in the same market, I'll tell that person like, hey, I've got a good friend. They own a property that sounds like what you're looking for. But checking with people that are already doing it in your market, like they may tell you right away, like, hey, you know what? I was buying 4-bedroom houses for a while and trying that. And honestly, you know what? It did not work out. So I switched. Now I'm doing 2 bedrooms and it seems like the demand or occupancy is like off the charts, like things like that. I mean, it's really just kind of like, you've got to put in some effort in terms of reaching out, doing your homework. But I feel like overall people are more than willing to help. And then sometimes realtors too in that market. But I should say I've had the best luck with, I think there's a big difference between realtors that are just realtors and realtors that are investors. Mm-hmm. Realtors that are investors automatically, I would say, get me way more and they understand where I'm coming from. And they help me more because they're looking at things because they have their own investment properties. They understand why something either works or doesn't work, and they'll save you a lot of time. But if they really know the market, I've had realtors call me and say like, hey, this property is going to be coming up and here's where it's located. And within 10 minutes, you have this and 10 minutes, you have that. And they're like, I know what you do. And this seems like this is the perfect fit. So, realtors and then even other operators in those markets. I mean, I feel like, overall people are very willing to help and kind of tell you what's working for them.
Gold, man. Okay. Good tips. Seriously. It's like the big value add. I love this episode so far. All right. We got another question, man. You mentioned traveling nurses. You mentioned corporate relocation. Yes. Okay. So some of my friends do some of the very similar stuff that you're working on. What is it that you have done or how do you become either like a preferred vendor or how do you get on there at radar? How do you like start getting that clientele when you're trying to fill your vacancy?
I mean, I think one of the easiest ways to at least start getting some exposure. I mean, boy, that's such a good question. Honestly, I love that question. There's a couple different ways. I mean, there's ways that are, I would say, more proactive and other ways that are just more kind of getting your name out there. Like Furnish Finder is a very popular site. I love that site. And it's not so much for, it's more specific towards travel nurses, but I've got some great contacts from insurance companies. In fact, right now I've got one property that I just renewed. The timing couldn't have worked out better. It was a fire damaged client that was in there. They moved out. 2 days before they moved out, my own insurance agent called me and said, Nathan, do you have anything, within this market? I said, yeah, actually I have one in 2 days that's coming up. And it was a 3-bedroom, 1-bath, completely renovated, really nice house. This is one I own. And I'd like to explain why I own this one too at some point. I think it's very important. This is a very interesting deal. But on that, it worked out to where he contacted me. So every time, but my point is going back to Furnish Finder, even if someone reaches out to you and it doesn't fit your property exactly, I will usually at least call that person and just say like, hey, my property doesn't fit you, but I want to let you know I have these properties in all these markets. If anything comes up in the future, please let me know. So it's kind of like constantly building a list of potential people, whether it's insurance companies. I mean, I know there are some people too that will be actually contact the hospitals and do all that stuff. I haven't honestly done too much of that. Knock on wood, I've been fortunate enough that I've either had enough leads come in or just enough people through the platforms in terms of Airbnb or Verbo that have just, gone to the place, even if they are medical. So I haven't pushed too hard on that. That's something that eventually I want to look at. But, I've been fortunate in that between corporate insurance and just normal Airbnb guests and the traveling nurses, I've had a pretty good fill. But, the main thing is obviously, your location. If you're 100 miles from a hospital, the chances of you getting a, much medical guest are going to be pretty slim. So, obviously first and foremost, in this one that I'm talking about, actually that's with the insurance company twice now. It's funny because this was set up for medical. It's actually on a medical campus, one of only 3 homes that are actually on the medical campus. If you don't mind,
is this the 3
can you explain why I bought this? Because I think
sure.
It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, we're
okay.
Still junkies.
So
Man.
the reason I bought this is it's Ascension Genesis Medical Campus, big huge campus. I bought this house, and there's a medical building to the west, a medical building to the east, owned by the hospital, and then there's 3 homes between these 2 buildings. Well, what had happened is the hospital bought the 3rd house, knocked it down. They now own that. So now there's only 2 properties left. There's the neighbors of mine, and then the one that I have leased out. And eventually, the hospital absolutely wants to connect these 2 pieces, these commercial medical buildings, so that they own the entire strip and the houses are gone. Mm-hmm. So I'm hoping the neighbor sells eventually next to me. And when that happens, I'm like the last piece that they have to connect. It's the only way they can do it. So this is one that's that's why I bought it. And that's kind of what I was getting
covered
at.
Land play, really.
Yeah. And that, because for me, like, I'm holding this one as long as it takes, because I feel like at some point there's going to be a payday just from the need of the hospital to end up completing that space. And I mean, I know what they're going to do. They're going to put another medical building up on those 3 houses after they knock them down. Yeah.
Here's a little tip. I mean, and you may have already tried this, but we knew that the city was going to condemn part of our property. We bought these lots here in San Antonio, had line of sight or understanding of what was happening, and surrounding landowners were out of state or out of town or something. I don't know exactly what happened. So they didn't know, I guess, what was going on. We're getting the letters, weren't getting notices. We bought those properties just because, and we were like, okay, we're either going to develop them. And so we went through the process of figuring out what we're going to do with the land. But city came along and paid us, 4x what we bought them for, just because they needed them. And we fought it. I mean, we had to hire an attorney and all that stuff just because it's a condemnation case. But long story short, if you see that and that's happening, you may want to go offer that guy some money now. I don't know if they live in that house or whatever. But
well, what's funny is I've already tried to buy it once.
Yeah.
But they were a minimum of 75,000 over fair market value. I mean, I was willing to pay more, but I'm going to let them sit for a little bit and see, because, like, for me, even if it makes sense long term, and I think it does, I still want to. I'm so weird about I cannot stand having a property if it doesn't cash flow. Like, I wouldn't want to get it, have it be negative, even though I know there's potentially a big payoff at the end. I mean, to me, minimum, it's got to at least break even or make a little bit of money. Then I'm fine holding it. But I have a weird thing about negative.
I love that, because it's you're in one case you're betting on the come instead of just buying it knowing that you have it cash flowing and it's self-sufficient. So yeah, different strategies, obviously. But when you're looking to invest, and I'm speaking to the audience here, if you're looking to invest and you're looking to buy something, and you can do what's a covered land play, is essentially what Nathan's talking about here,
right? Where
you are buying something, it's being paid for, and you're expecting it to appreciate because or you have some inside information or whatever it is. That is a much better scenario than buying a piece of dirt that is non-income producing property that you are carrying taxes, have liability on, all these other things without ever getting cash flow, hoping that it appreciates or hoping that the city condemns it or hoping that something happens.
Yeah, absolutely.
In our scenario, we had the opportunity to develop it. We're like, okay, we have an out. So I always talk about it, and you've mentioned it a couple times, have multiple outs in any situation that you are either acquiring or renting or doing something with a property before you.
No, and and to give you an example, because that's such a great point, and something that I think is so important, is you really have to be flexible and have different ways. Because, like I said, I don't like doing fix and flips, but I had one that I'd finished that was downtown in the city that I live. Great location because you can walk the downtown out of the backyard. It has like a little walkway, a river, and everything else. Just a really popular area. But which that's a whole nother story, but the contractor took way, way longer than what it should have. He couldn't get people. It was a nightmare. But anyway, by the time it was done, I think there had been like, I don't know, 3 or 4 rate hikes in that time. And the market has come back quite a bit now, but it like got really quiet for like a 2-month period. As far as like just the buyers kind of dropped off. The number of attendees at open houses, the realtors were telling me like, wow, it's like 1/10 of what we were getting just like 2 weeks ago. So in that case, instead of just, keeping it out there or selling it at a huge discount, I kind of changed gears and said, you know what, I'm just going to do a rent to own then. So I got an option deposit from somebody. I got the top rent I could possibly get on it. And, I'm just going to hold it for now. And if they end up acquiring it, great. Our option price is at a very solid price. Or, maybe if they don't execute on it and I get it back, if the market's right to sell, then I will sell. But I think, sometimes people are too quick to rush and say like, well, that's what I do. I fix and flip. So I'm just gonna have to sell it. And, maybe I make 5,000 instead of 50. Oh, well, to me, there's much better options. You got to be a little bit creative and open, flexible based on what's happening in the market. Same with arbitrage. Yeah. I'm buying when the rates are low and it makes sense. When they don't and the cash flow is way stronger, arbitrage just makes more sense now for me currently.
Yeah. Yeah. I've always had a thought process very similar to that because finding a deal is so damn hard, right? Finding that deal. And once you have it, it's like, I could just sell this for $5,000, take my lumps and go, or I could figure out a way. But obviously it comes down to what's your cash situation currently? Can you afford to not recapitalize by doing a rent to own?
Well, and what's tough too, I think, because you bring up a kind of a great point that I was just thinking about is, a lot of people that do the fix and flips, I mean, they're using hard money lender at severe high rates. And honestly, they kind of don't have a choice. If the hard money lender is not going to work with them, they've got to get out of the deal. But see, that's one thing where I'm different. Like even on the fix and flips, I don't do them that way with the hard money where I'm under pressure that I have to sell it. I like to have options. Yeah. Even if that option is like, I already know I have a takeout for the hard money lender if I need to keep it. Yeah. But I don't ever go into, I never went into a fix and flip where the only exit plan was having to sell it and pay that person back.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to say I used hard money very few times, like maybe once, honestly. Everything else was private lenders. Always had conversations with people that knew what I was doing, knew what I was working on.
Exactly.
Started slow, like, hey, this is a deal. I've been doing this on my own. Even, early on, it was a private lender who gave me like, 10% rate with no points. That was the big win, like no points. And he didn't care.
Oh, yeah.
I kept that for 15 years. It was a 15-year term.
Right.
But he was like, he just wanted money on the street working. And so that gave me the flexibility of wrapping some of his loans, doing a lot of different exit strategies that I used. Yeah. So that's a good point. If you're doing the rehab and the fix and flip and that sort of thing. So I'm kind of curious. I want to ask you, what was the transition? Like, how did you get out of the commercial lending and when did you actually get into the investing side where you were like full-time and or do you still do commercial loans? Maybe I misunderstood that.
No. Well, it's interesting because I recently started a debt placement company with some former colleagues of mine, but it's more like it's not my number. Real estate absolutely is going to be my number one thing until the day I die. Like that, nothing's going to change with that. It's more just a side revenue alternative, another source of income. It's almost more like a commission-based setup. I mean, I have ownership in the company, but I'm not officially a lender. I'm just a broker, and I am brokering some deals And that's something new that I kind of started just to kind of have even another, source of revenue income. I like to be diversified somewhat. But, honestly, it was a couple things that happened. I would say 3 years before I left banking, I started to put the gas pedal down a little bit as far as like real estate. It's frustrating too, because I feel like if I had to do it over again, and I know people are going to, are not going to like me for saying this, but I probably would never have gone to college. Even though I went to two great colleges, I would have probably spent $50,000-$60,000 on mentorships and training and things like that. And I feel like I'd be 100 times further ahead than where I am now, even though I've had a good run, especially the last 3 years. But I kind of, to get back to your question, I kind of started 3 years before I left. And I was just kind of like one of those things like, why am I working for someone? Like, I've always been the kind of person where people that know me would be like, I can't believe that you're not just doing something on your own. So I was always kind of had that entrepreneurial spirit. I love talking and investing. It's just something I've always been passionate about. But I mean, it really started, I'd say like 3 years ago that I really started pushing it. And the big impetus for it, I think, was I had some clients that I do a lot of financing for business acquisitions too. And a lot of these clients were using this Rob's account, and I'd never heard of a Rob's account. I'm like, I usually have heard of everything. I'm like, what's a Rob's account? And it's similar to a self-directed IRA, except you put your retirement into it. It's a C corporation, but you can actually take a salary. So, because before when I was looking at it, I'm like, well, I could do a self-directed IRA. I'm like, but that doesn't pay my bills like on a monthly basis. So how am I ever going to leave my job with a self-directed IRA or a solo 401k if I can't actually pay myself? Well, this Rob's account, retirement structure, you can pay yourself a salary. I mean, there are certain, restriction things you can and can't do as far as like family being involved and stuff like that. You have to be careful about. But that really was the big impetus for me, because once I could plow my money from my 401k and I had a self-directed IRA as well, I put them both into the Rob's. And then I kind of went on a little bit of a buying spree and just started getting things going. And, and I would say, and I don't want to get off topic, but I mean, just some of the political stuff that was going on.
That's great.
At the bank, and just stuff that I just wasn't comfortable with, where I was just like, hey guys, let's stick to banking. Like, we're starting to get way off topic here and what we're expecting people to help. We want people to like almost think or act a certain way. And I'm like, I don't understand what's going on. So for me, it was kind of a personal issue too, where I'm just like, I'm just not feeling it. And again, too, I've always kind of been the person that I'm like, I always knew at some point I'd go on my own, but it sure took a lot longer than it should have. But
what year did you go off on your own?
It was roughly 3 years ago. So around 2020, I think.
So recent then.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'd had some properties, like I said, a little bit here and there before, but I didn't consider myself like a serious investor per se, very knowledgeable, but in terms of actual investments, I mean, and honestly, anyway, with investments, I found like anything else, you can read and watch and do all you want. But you never learn anything until you get your hands into it. And because there's things, especially like you said, with multifamily, there's a lot more factors with multifamily than a single family house. And I know that even from the lending side, and also from, I do have a multifamily as well, that I operate as well from the operation side. But there's a lot to it that you don't even think about. Even though I've lent on them for 25 years, there are things that, you're like, oh, geez, I had no idea now that I'm an operator.
Oh, yeah.
So
honestly, the day it closes, you're done. You like get your commission check and you're like, all right, great, good luck. And then the operations the business
right.
has to start,
Yeah. And honestly, it's just one of those things, like anytime you're dealing with people, it can be challenging, whether it's tenants, whatever, you name it. I mean, it's, it can be challenging, but it's the only good thing I think, because I started, so late, kind of this journey, is it's really motivated me to kind of push outside my comfort zone in terms of, how quickly I've, added some properties and just kind of done some different deals that, may have taken me 10 years if I started a long time ago, that I've, kind of done, within the last 3 years. Cause I've kind of had the strategy right now where every dollar that comes in, I'm really just reinvesting into more properties and different things, and kind of like delayed gratification. Then at some point, I need to sit back. My wife and said, like, you need to at least take just like 90 days and just like relax, like just let all the hard work you do, like pay off for a little bit and then go get your next property And I'm always agree. I'm like, yeah, you're right. And then the next week she's like, why is there a new LLC, article, or, why is this
letter in the mail? What the hell?
In the mail? Right.
Like every day there's a new LLC form.
Yeah. She's like, how many companies do you, she's like, I don't even know how many companies you have now. I just laugh. I'm like, yeah, I'm not sure I do either, but.
Well, you taught me a Rob's. I've never heard of that. That's very interesting. So are you still
Very
using
cool.
that, and you are plowing money into that, and then you invest through that vehicle? So all the money that it earns is tax free. Is that what I understand you're doing?
No. That's where it's different. You file a true C corp, just like a normal C corp.
Okay.
But you're allowed to basically transfer your retirement money without paying as if you took a distribution. So you can use it to either buy an existing or to start a new business. And then eventually at some point, if you want, you can convert it away from a retirement account. But then, obviously any gains and all that stuff, you would have to pay those, at that time. Or if you just keep it in there. But no, you do pay taxes, but it just allows you to transfer all that money into the business without a big tax event when you transfer it.
Got it. Yeah.
Obviously, like if you pay yourself a salary, you're going to have the same payroll taxes and all the normal stuff.
Yeah. No, I get that on the expenses side, but if that entity that used because like the good idea or the thing with a self-directed IRA, if I take that money, I invest it in a deal, and that deal earns money that goes straight back into that IRA, that's tax-free money essentially.
Correct.
So, yeah.
Yep.
So is it the same thing? Like I get the expenses that you're paying.
Yeah, no, and that's the big advantage of still the self-directed IRA. Like if you don't need the money and you're not trying to like leave your job, I mean, honestly, I think it makes more sense to be in a self-directed IRA or something like that, where you can just accumulate a bunch of earnings and income tax-free. But for me, it was a little bit different because I'm like, what's the quickest way I can leave my job?
Yeah.
And still invest in real estate, but not like take an actual distribution and pay a huge penalty in taxes on my retirement accounts.
That makes sense. Okay. So I'm curious, we're getting to the end here. I want to ask, what are you, I guess, focused on? Like, how many are you like, hey, I need to have this many houses. I need to have this much cash flow. Like, do you have goals and targets that you want to share cause I'm just kind of curious with what you're working on?
Yeah, I have goals, but I mean, I'm a little bit different that I don't necessarily have a number target per se. Like I don't go and say every month I have to do 3 deals. And the reason behind that is if there's 10 good deals in a month, I'll do 10 deals. But if there's no good deals for 6 months, I don't feel this urge that I just have to do a deal so I can tell people like, hey, I closed a transaction. Like who cares? To me, if it's not a good
selfies in front of, yeah.
Like if it's not a good deal, who cares? Like I'm not obsessed about having the number. Like I'm more obsessed with the numbers on the individual deal. Like when I look at the deal, like what's the cash on cash? Does it meet kind of like what I want to see? Which for the arbitrage, it's got to be 60% plus, or I'm not even touching it. Like there's no reason for me to even bother with it. It's a lower return, obviously, if I buy the house, but the house, there has to be another reason I'm buying the house. Like say with that one that's on the hospital, like there's a long-term play in that, in addition to providing great cash flow in the interim. Because like with that one specifically, that the insurance clients are in, I mean, I like that one because the market rents, they're paying $1,100 a month over what market rents are through the insurance company. So I'm actually making great cash flow, but there's also a long-term play in that one. So for me to own that one makes perfect sense. But where rates are right now, I'm really just kind of looking at arbitrage. So I'm kind of like reaching out to landlords and property management companies, doing due diligence. I'm trying to figure out areas to kind of connect some of the other areas I have, and just keep kind of expanding that. But I don't have a specific like number of properties. Eventually, all I know is eventually, probably the next 3-4 months, I am at the point I've got to add like an assistant or somebody that's going to have to come on and start kind of helping me with this because, the numbers and just the stuff that's going on, it's definitely starting to add up now, and it just accumulates. And every time you add additional property, it's just like a little bit more. And, there's the stuff that I think probably all of us hate, like, changing utilities and insurance and stuff like that. Like I got to find somebody that can, that's going to take all that stuff over because I absolutely hate doing any of that. Like I like finding the deals. I like structuring the deals. I like meeting with the landlords and the management. I love seeing properties. I mean, my wife loves to shop, but my thing is real estate. I mean, I can go look at 20 houses, 20 apartments, in a week, and I love it. I love seeing the different styles and what people have done.
I got a little tip for you. Maybe you can use it. Maybe you won't. I don't know if you are big into like setting up systems and processes, but if you're growing, then obviously you need to in order to scale a bit. But one thing that could be helpful is Asana. I don't know if you're familiar with Asana, but it is a project. It's free. It's project management software. You can go in, like right now I have VAs overseas, and it's a Kanban board, or it's just a task list or whatever. Mm-hmm. Every time you get a property, if you have it templated out, like turn on utilities, do this, order this, whatever it is.
And is it spelled like Sauna, like SAUNA, or different?
ASANA. Asana.
Oh, Asana. Okay.
Yeah, Asana.com. I mean, there's a number of them.
I'm definitely going to check. I'm definitely going to check.
I'm telling you, you tag your teammate right over wherever they are in the U.S. and the Philippines, wherever they are, and then they get an entire task list of items that auto populates. So I don't know if you do it on a CRM or however you're doing it.
No, that's great.
Sit and do it one time, and
right.
It's like you can outsource those little things that you're doing.
No, and that's what's cool. It's cool to hear about you using the virtual assistants, because I know a lot of people that do, and I've just kind of been hesitant to do that. But I mean, I have no choice. Soon I'm going to have to either bring some on or get virtual assistants. But that's the one area, to be completely honest, I would say that I probably lack in a little bit is some of the technology and these systems. I mean, I have some things like with the corporate and short-term rentals. I've got a good system in place as far as like how things work with my cleaners and automated messages and all that awesome. Stuff is pretty good.
What do you
but I really need like an overall thing, like you're saying, like Asana for like all that other stuff that I hate to do.
Yeah. I mean, it is. And you can have, again, if you have an assistant, you can have them set up with your, like for us, it's CPS Energy. Like you can have your corporate login essentially for this thing, so they can go in, turn it off. Same with the water, all of that good stuff. Man, I don't know. I feel like I could talk to you for a long time. I don't know if you got a hard stop right now, but I got some more questions if you got another second.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay. Yeah, no problem.
All right. So yeah, again, I just on Asana and that sort of thing. Just if you're setting that up and you want to chat about it, by all means, hit me up. I'm literally looking at Asana right now because I have a bunch of questions that I ask everybody. And it's a great system. I use it for.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
All right. So the nuts and bolts on the, I guess what I'm trying to drill down to on the arbitrage business, like what are do you have certain language in contracts or your leases with the owners that help you to then release these things?
The only difference is it's a pretty standard lease agreement. The only main difference is there's an addendum to the lease, but honestly, that addendum actually protects the landlord, and it's actually more helpful versus something where they're like, oh no, what's a side agreement? The side agreement just basically states that they understand that I'm responsible for the guest in any damage they cause, which, obviously you have insurance that covers that. And there's free insurance even through Airbnb that covers, damage as well. But it's essentially telling them like, hey, you're not going to be held responsible for something the guests do, or say something changes and short-term rentals aren't allowed or whatever like that. Like they're not the ones responsible. I'm not just going to walk away and be like, hey, sorry, they changed the rules. So, I'm taking my furniture and here's your unit back. It's just more letting them know that I'm responsible for what I'm responsible for. They're not going to be held accountable for it. And the big things as far as repairs, I let them know that it is their responsibility, just like a normal lease. But, I tell them, like, if it's something small, you're not even going to hear from me. Like, say the garbage disposal stops working. Yes, I could have you do it and all that, or maybe I will have you reimburse me or whatever. But honestly, if it's a great performing unit, and if I have a great relationship with that landlord, say it's $40, $50, I'm just going to have my contractor go over there, knock it out, take care of it. I'm not even going to bother him.
Yeah.
I'll just tell him the fact, like, hey, I replaced your garbage disposal. Don't worry about it. We're good.
Yeah.
Just
don't rock the boat and keep the tenant happy and
absolutely
get to it faster than putting in a report and waiting for them to show up.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good advice as well. And I'm just still kind of curious. So are you seeing typically on these midterm rentals, like double the rent? And do you post your midterm rentals on Airbnb, or is that two different strategies, right? Are you posting only your weekend rental style?
No, really good question. As far as the rents, that somewhat depends on for a corporate rental, like how big the group is. So if it's a bigger unit, like a 3-bedroom, and say it's like 6 people, in those cases, I'd say you're really close, almost exactly what you said. You're about doubling the what my rent is in terms of what I charge them. And then the other question you had was as far as how I market or advertise for those. Yeah. What's interesting is the corporate rentals, a lot of times I actually do get contacted through the platform. And normally we'll start out where they may basically lock in a month and they'll actually do it through Airbnb or Vrbo. But then one of my strategies, which hopefully nobody from Airbnb or Vrbo's on this call are going to watch this, but if it goes well, and as I start building up good rapport, my main goal with the corporate rentals is to actually talk to them about billing them directly, because it saves a tremendous amount of fees that you pay through the platforms. And so far, 100% of them have agreed after a month or 2 months to just go ahead and pay that way. But what's cool is I go to them and I'm like, hey, I can save you $300 a month if you're interested. Yeah. I mean, every one of them are like, yeah, I can pay $300 less a month. Sure. Like they don't care. Yeah. But it's funny, on my end, I make like almost $800 more a month just by them billing directly.
I was wondering what their fees on a percentage.
Yeah, it's a sizable difference on a monthly basis to build. So when I have a corporate in there, I kind of like snooze my listing for that. And then once they give me notice, like they always give me 3 days notice if they're not going to renew for the next month, if it's corporate, then I just open it back up and let bookings hit unless I have another, corporate lined up already or somebody's in place.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome, man. Good stuff. Ton of value on this strategy, man, because it's, I hear people doing it, and my conversation, I just listened to the episode with the traveling realtor where we were talking about this again. It just aired on Monday, and I was just like, am I late to the game to try this strategy out? Right? Yeah. Is it saturated? Like, do you feel like it's saturated because you're still doing it? I mean, you're still looking.
Yeah. I mean, and that's where, again, I think, and this may be all related to the PTSD from 2008, but this is again where I'm trying to stay away from for the most part, the vacation type, short-term rentals. So like I would be more nervous if all I had was like vacation type rentals, because if something happens like either COVID again or whatever, there could be a huge disruption as far as, guests and bookings and all that stuff. But again, I'm really just crazy about trying to focus on areas that have the hospitals, universities, and all these other things where I'm not necessarily, it's about someone per se taking a vacation. Now, again, I do have Airbnbs that's what they do, but it's not all of them. I have a pretty good mix of corporate, insurance, and then the more traditional, Airbnb short-term rental.
Awesome, man. Like, I appreciate you jumping on. Like I love having these conversations, talking real estate, especially talking investing. As the show indicates, Agents Building Cash Flow. Like this show is geared towards helping real estate professionals, real estate agents grow their passive income. Do you have any advice to any agents who may not currently invest?
Yeah, no, I do. There's 2 things. One, which we kind of talked about before, is I'm trying to think how to word this, but the one issue I see, and it's not just agents, I'm just saying it's more in general, but it applies to agents as well, is I feel like sometimes people are too concerned about where they feel like they have to have so much knowledge and have everything figured out before they like take their first step to do anything. And I think that's really the wrong approach. And some of that I think it's fear-based. Some people are just like, I'm so worried that my first investment, I'm going to make a mistake or I'm going to do something wrong. And if that's really how you feel, I think on your first deal, or even your second, like partner up with somebody that's an expert, partner up with somebody that knows what they're doing, learn from them, but you still have to get your hands dirty. You got to take action. That's a big thing. It's just actually doing it, get into it. But for your first one, if you're really just unsure, I think it makes sense to partner. Maybe you only partner that one time and then you do everything else on your own, but you're going to learn a lot that you wouldn't know. If it's the first time that you're doing it, you're going to pick up a lot from that person as well as what you learn on your own. I think that's definitely, recommended. And like I said, the other thing is, don't get so wrapped up where you feel like you have to spend 18 months or 2 years to try and become an expert on everything. I've dabbled here in different things, and then I kind of, I think kind of zoned in, and I started feeling like, okay, I feel like this is my thing. I mean, like I said, I have the multifamily, I have the apartment building, I have land contracts, I have rent to own, I have these corporate rentals, the arbitrage. But like for me, it's helpful doing the different types of investments, because the ones that are really cranking as far as cash flow, like they really stand out. Because like, you give an example, like on one of my corporate rentals, I was thinking back, and I'm like, I would have to do almost 7 rental properties, traditional rental properties, to net what I'm netting on the same property.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm all about efficiency. If I can have one property make the same as 7, I don't want to deal with 7 properties. I'll deal with the one.
Yeah. And then just go find another one of those. And yeah.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Man, great advice. Again, just dropping a bunch throughout the episode. I really appreciate the information, sharing your knowledge. I thought your advice was going to say, get off your ass and go do something, go get busy, do some deals. But yeah,
again, you've got to take the action. Because again, like I said, I know a lot of people that are interested in investing, and I'll talk to them, and I talked to them, say 2 years ago, and I'm like, hey, I haven't seen in a while. I'm like, hey, did you end up doing anything? No, but I ordered this course by so-and-so. It's like, well, I mean, that's great. But unless you're going to, I guess, just do YouTube videos or something like that and pretend you're an expert because you read all this stuff. I mean, that's great. But like, you're never going to learn everything by a book. You've got to actually, I learned so much stuff that I had no idea about. The first couple deals I did, I'm just like, I can't believe I didn't even think about this. Just things you don't know because you haven't done it.
Yeah, we talk about. You mentioned it earlier. You were saying you wouldn't have gone to college, if you invest. So just think about that money that you did
Right.
pay. Right, that was an education.
Absolutely.
And I've had plenty of investor guests on the show. I think about it myself. I'm always like, if I were to take that money and invest it, then where would I be? That's one thought process.
Right.
And that's what I carry that through with my kids. I'm like, I'm happy to teach you this business so that then you can make a decision on your own about college. But it's also,
and I think that,
go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that's something that's important too, is especially the disparity now. Like 30, 40 years ago, when you had a degree and then what you earned, you could somewhat justify, like you're actually, just look at like an investment, your return for what you put in versus what you're getting out of it. It kind of made sense. But we've had a situation where it's the only place I know of that there's always a price increase every year, no matter what. Doesn't matter what's going on in the economy. Doesn't matter what. Schools and colleges constantly just the price keep going up. But what people are getting paid now with degrees relative to the cost for the education, to me now is so lopsided. It just doesn't make sense. But it's funny because in our own family, I've got a son who's a welder, and he loves it. And he's making more than his college friends, and he has 0 school debt. My other son, he's stationed at Fort Campbell, went into the Army. I couldn't be happier for him. He's got free living. He's got a great pension. If he stays and does that, it's they provide free housing, obviously, free food, all that stuff. It's funny. A lot of our kids have kind of, not gone down the normal path of go to college, spend $200,000 and then, get a terrible job not making that much.
Yeah, exactly. And if you think of it in the sense of investing those dollars, if you took $50,000 and you bought something and you lost all $50,000, you'd still get an education from it, right?
You absolutely
kind of the same.
A much more relevant education, I would say.
Yeah. So yeah. All right. I love it. Hey man, it's been great catching up. I'm going to have your contact info in the show notes. If anyone wants to reach out to Nathan directly, please do so.
Yeah, absolutely.
It has been a great conversation. I hope you got a lot out of it, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Did you know that 80% of the agents we speak with got into real estate in order to gain passive income so they could obtain financial freedom and become work optional? If you want to stay up to date, the best way is to make sure you're subscribed. So if you haven't done that, go ahead and do it now. We'll catch you on the next episode.